الساكسفون وموسيقى الجاز والجهاد والخطاب التضامني وفلسطين المحتلة والهوية. ما العلاقة بينها؟ الهوية اليهودية من الداخل. معكم زينب الصفار، تابعونا. هو حفيد قائد بارز سابق في منظمة الإرغون اليهودية اليمينية المتطرفة، وجندي إسرائيلي سابق، ملحن وعازف الجاز وروائي وناشط سياسي وكاتب. إنه جلعاد أتزمون. كتاباته أثارت جدلاً كبيراً لكونها انطلقت من يهودي ولد في إسرائيل وهاجر منها نهائياً بملء إرادته، ثائراً على ممارسات المحتل الإسرائيلي. نتيجة انتقاداته للهوية اليهودية واليهودية بشكل عام والصهيونية بشكل خاص، اتهم بمعاداة السامية. في كتابه الأخير من هو المتسكع، أثار أتزمون عاصفة من الآراء، حيث وصف أستاذ العلوم السياسية في جامعة شيكاغو البروفيسور جون ميرشايمر مقاربته بالمذهلة والمستفزة. وقال عنه الكاتب والناشط الثائر المناهض للإمبريالية جيمس باترس إن جلعاد لديه الشجاعة التي يفتقدها الكثير من المثقفين الغربيين لقول الحقيقة المتعلقة بسياسة الهوية اليهودية. بينما أسف الموسيقي الأمريكي ريتشارد سيغل للهجوم الذي يتعرض له أتزمون، ومن ضمنه الهجوم الذي انطلق من أطراف غير متوقعة وجميع من يعنيهم الأمر، وهو يدعو إلى المزيد من التحليل العميق والاحترام المتبادل. كتاب وكاتب يكشف حقيقة إسرائيل من الداخل ويجعلنا نفهم طبيعة الصراع معها. Mr. Gilad Atzmon, welcome to Al Mayadeen TV.
I'm very happy to have you in my house.
We're happy to have you too. Yes, in your book, The Wandering Who, a study of Jewish identity politics, you say in the foreword, and I'm quoting you here, that your grandfather, he was a former commander in the right-wing Irgun terror organization. He had, I must admit, a tremendous influence on me in my early days. Now, what changed this tremendous influence into tremendous indifference, let's say, and antagonism with the ideas of your grandfather?
I was raised to believe that there is really something unique about Israel, about the Jewish state. I was raised to believe that we are a new breed, we are a new kind of productive, authentic, genuine, because the whole idea of Zionism was to bring a new Jew to the world, not a moneylender, not a banker. This is Zionism, this is not me presenting Jews as such. Jews that are connected to the land, and I was sure that I would become a farmer. I was always, and I'm still, obsessed with work, being productive. So in a way, I'm very consistent with my Israeli patriotic upbringing. However, at a certain stage, I realized that everything I had, everything I possessed, was on the expense of someone else, of the Palestinians.
How did you realize this?
Lebanon war was a very big shock for me, because this was the first time where I saw Israeli army, how brutal it could be. I realized that as much as we wanted to believe or presented Israel, or Israel was presented to itself as a humanist military force, the IDF. In the early stages of the war, just seeing Israeli soldiers, I'm saying it for the first time, it probably would shock a lot of people. Israeli soldiers taking pictures on Syrian tanks along together with Syrian dead bodies.
How was your affair with Israel and Zionism over?
I saw quite a few devastating incidents in '82, and beside the entire war was nothing but the Israeli aggression. We all remember how many thousand Lebanese lost their life. I was in the Air Force. I saw footage of Israeli airplane footage of Israeli pilots bringing down houses, neighborhoods. But I think that the most critical event for me was my visit to Ansar in '84. Ansar was basically a concentration camp, not very different from Dakhel or Guantanamo Bay. It was a concentration camp for people who are regarded as political enemies. There were no charges pressed against any of the prisoners. Thousands of them, every Lebanese summer, 44, 46 degrees. They're all surrounded by barbed wires. I was standing there
What did you
in
do
uniform.
there?
I was actually at the time in the Air Force military band. And we came to give a concert. And
To entertain the Israeli
Israelis, you know, so they can continue
to do their job.
to do the job, kind of with a smile on their face. What I saw we were taken to a short, a kind of tourist scenery trip in the camp, and at a certain stage we arrived at a flat land. Looked like a football pitch to me, and we were surrounded with cubes, like 12 or 18 kind of concrete cubes, very small, 1.20 meters long, maybe 1 meter high. And I asked the commander what were they. I thought that putting dogs in such weather, in such constructions, would be lethal. And he told me, these are not for dogs, these were our solitary confinements.
For the detainees?
For detainees. You put a Palestinian in one of those, within 12 hours, he becomes a Zionist. After all the Holocaust Shoah indoctrination, it became very clear to me that in that situation, I was the Nazi in uniform, and the Palestinians were the Jews. And it was just before I finished my compulsory duty, and it was already clear to me then and there that I will have to leave Israel. Unless something changes, there was no room for me to be part of it.
So this was then when you left Israel, and it was the same time when you denounced your Israeli affiliation.
It still took me 10 years to leave Israel completely. In '94, at the peak of the Oslo Accords or fantasy, this is where I realized that it is a lost battle. When I saw what were the fruits of this peace enthusiasm within the Israeli society, they basically pushed the Palestinians to the corner. They told, listen man, forget about returning to your land, forget about that, forget about all of it. I realized that even if there is peace, even if it would have been a success, I really didn't want to be part of it. By then I realized that I was living on Palestinian land, that I enjoy my Western ideal life on the expense of millions of refugees. I didn't want to be part of it, and I left them.
You said in one of your articles, and actually in your book too, that as you were living there in occupied Palestine, the Palestinians were invisible to you. What does that mean?
As a young, definitely. This is pretty shocking, but...
how were they invisible in this sense?
They're as invisible as 1.5 million Iraqis. That Iraqis are invisible to the vast majority of English people who are complicit in a war in Iraq. I think that part of the culture, supremacist culture that I was part of, and we in the West are complicit in a very similar culture, you don't see the victims of your own oppression. I saw them in the old city of Jerusalem. They were fixing my dad's car. There was a wonderful woman who cooked for me every day, but I didn't know much about her, and I didn't know much about the gardener. The Palestinian would come to work in the supermarket at 7 o'clock in the morning. They would disappear. We never asked ourselves why. You know, when I was a kid, every too often my dad would wake us all and say, oh, there was a terror attack in the Lebanese border, or the other time they would come from the beach. And we always saw it as a continuation of anti-Jewish moronic or sinister behavior. We never asked ourselves what was going on. We never understood that these people were actually refugees who were fighting to go back to the land that belongs to them and didn't belong to me and didn't belong to my parents. I didn't understand it. It took me many years to understand, I admit.
So what did this utter support of the Palestinians actually cost Gilad Atzmon?
It is more than obvious that there are more than a few people who are extremely unhappy with my views. Zionist, obviously. I just heard Alan Dershowitz, notorious
he attacked you.
Yeah, he really doesn't like me. Actually, I'm very happy with.
Yeah, and he attacked the people who wrote something about your book.
Yeah,
like
for sure. That are much more superior to him intellectually and academically. I defined new terms, which you want me to talk about.
No, we're going to get back to define these terms, but we have to stop now for a short break. Short break, and we'll be back. Stay tuned. Welcome back, Gilad. You were talking about the Judaism, the Jewishness, the Zionism. How can you elaborate more on these particular concepts?
It's very important. It is very important to differentiate all those J notions. Judaism, the religion, it's a spiritual code. I myself don't deal much with Judaism, and it is also very important to mention that Jewish religious collective have never been in the history of the Jews a sinister, murderous collective. And by the way, a lot of people, Palestinians, are fully aware of the fact that they weren't, because they were living with Palestinian Jews for so many, pre 48. My family were in the region from the 19th century, and it was very peaceful. So Judaism is the spirit. The Jews are the people. I never talk about the Jews, Yahud. I never talk about the Jews because I don't talk about people. Now, one of the biggest difference between my work and my predecessors is that a lot of quite intelligent writers and academics wrote about the Talmud. For instance, one of the most important, most interesting writer was Israel Shachak, who elaborated on the Talmud and pointed out at the deep goy-hating teaching within the Talmud. And yet, there is a problem, because most Jews don't know the Talmud. Israelis don't know the Talmud, and they don't study the Talmud except of the religious. The crimes in Palestine were committed largely by secular Jews. Zionism is a secular school. It is only after 1967 that the Messianic Jewish movement was formed and followed the teaching of Rabbi Kook. So I'm actually arguing here that the problem that we are facing is actually with secular Jewish identity. And it's not Judaism. It's not the Jews, because not all the Jews follow this ideology. The Jews who play in my band, they are Jews by ethnicity, but they don't follow this identity. And here I've managed to define three categories that are very crucial for my work. I'm talking about Jewish identity politics. And what is identity? A form of identification. I ask, what does it mean to be identified as a Jew?
You don't identify yourself as a Jew?
No, definitely not.
So if you're not a Jew, what are you then?
I'm many things, but definitely don't identify as a Jew. I'm a jazz musician, I'm a father, I'm a thinker, I'm a writer.
So this is your identity.
I don't like to talk in terms of identity because I don't have to identify. I don't have to identify as a jazz musician because I have enough concerts as a jazz musician all over the world. So I don't have to say, I am a jazz musician. I don't have to have a badge. I don't have to have a flag. But some people need to identify.
Why are you hated by them and by others at the same time? I mean, even some other organizations, let's say, the movements like the BDS movement, the boycott, divestment and sanctions, they have a problem with Gilad Atzmon.
Because when someone presents the truth in a very simple manner, because the truth is usually very simple, quite a few people realized that they were lying for more than a while. As you probably noticed, no one until now stood up and said, Gilad, you got your facts wrong. You say A, but it's actually B. Nobody has ever stood up and said, Gilad, you got your fact wrong. Gilad, your argument is flawed.
No rebuttal against your
They always
facts.
say, Gilad, we want Gilad to be silent. They want Gilad to be silent because if I'm correct, they are wasting our time. Now, I'm very dangerous for some of the lefty speakers within this discourse, because I was the first one who in 2006 congratulated the Hamas. Because for me it was very clear that if I'm in a solidarity with the Palestinian people, I have to respect the Palestinian democratic choice. The Jews went to chew me then. The same people who stood up against me now were the first people who stood up against me in 2006. I was the first one to congratulate the Hezbollah for its success. And I do understand that Islam is the leading anti-imperial force, not 12 leftists in Acne. I think that if left wants to be relevant, it has to bond immediately with the people who lead the resistance in this world.
How has this harsh criticism of Gilad Atzmon's ideas and beliefs, how has this stopped you from expressing your ideas so frankly?
It didn't stop me, and it cannot stop me. Why it cannot stop me? Because these lobbies are operating within...
Not only from the left-wingers, but also from the right-wingers.
No, for sure. All those lobbies are operating within political discourse. I'm not interested in political discourse. I've never in my life been a member of any party. I'm a musician. I meet thousands of people every week. And I write my thoughts, and I'm read by tens of thousands every day. And no one can stop me. The only thing that they do manage to do, bless them, is to expose themselves as book burners.
People who like your politics or your music?
People who like both my politics and my music. Not everyone who likes my... I don't think that anyone can... I think that everybody likes my
because
music.
In the debate about your book on one of the American TV networks, they said that you're a good saxophonist, but don't write politics because
So I think that my views, as I said, have never been challenged. And by the way, I'm looking forward to be challenged. Recently, I was challenged by Professor Norton Mezevinsky, who is probably the biggest expert on Jewish issues, and he had some points that was considering. It's not that I'm free of mistakes. I'm a human being. We are moving away from fear. If the people in Al Tahrir said, we lost our fear, we feel the same. I lost my fear. So many people around us lost their fears.
Gilad, how do you see the future of the Arab-Israeli conflict, the Palestinian-Israeli conflict?
This is how I end my book. I think that we are moving towards a one state, a state of its citizens, and it is obvious that this state won't be called Israel. It will be Palestine. It is very clear that Israel cannot lead such a move because it must de-Zionize itself or de-Jewishify itself, not to drift away from the Jewish ideology, Jewish secular ideology of supremacy. And I don't see them doing it voluntarily, but I think that the Palestinians will lead such a move. It is not going to be a political change. It is the facts on the ground. It is the facts on the ground. The majority of the people between the inhabitants, between the river and the sea, are Palestinians now. And Israel won't be able to maintain its superiority forever.
Gilad Atzmon, thanks a million for this special edition from your house in London.
شكرا a million.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل ودائما من الداخل. إلى اللقاء.